Hey friends, this is Jennifer Anderson with Uptown Common. Our topic for today is types of markets. People ask us, what we do, and we mention that we do markets, and the majority of people say, oh, farmers markets, and we say, well, yes and no. And this conversation happens so frequently that I thought it would probably be helpful to give a basic overview of the types of markets or pop-ups that vendors might participate in, because it seems that there's a lot of confusion or a lack of awareness about all the different kinds. And because if you're considering markets for your business, you may have discarded that option if your idea is just farmers markets as well. So to start, there are really no hard and fast rules about market types. So I'm just going to give some general kind of guidelines or pros and cons to consider about each type. And there's a lot of overlapping, and really it's up to the organizer to decide how they want to operate and advertise their market. So just pay attention to what they tell you on their website, on their application. Ask other vendors about their experience if you can, and even maybe visit ahead of time if the timing works out. Some markets are just once a year, so that may not work out time-wise for you. But if you can, if it's something that happens a couple times a year, maybe you can make that work out. So the first type is farmers markets, like I mentioned. And the pros are they're excellent for consumables. Many happen during the week when other markets aren't happening, and usually there's a lower booth fee, pretty low actually. There are lots of them, so around by us, every city and town has their own on a different day of the week, so you could go to several each week in a different city or town. Some even happen during the winter, so there's that. And they do have them weekly, so it's a place you can go every week for the season. You'll be able to set up, and people will be able to know where to find you. Cons, it's not ideal for handmade or art type things. There's lower attendance usually, at least at the ones around by us, than some of the other kinds of events. It's higher potential to saturate your market or customer base since they're there weekly. How many, for us, or maybe a lot of handmade or art people, how many weeks in a row does one person want to buy a wallet or a macrame plant hanger or whatever? So there's that. They're not usually marketed quite as well. It's just kind of assumed, and many times they're not as particularly well organized, and usually they're not juried. So all those are things to consider. Because the fee is low, because they're usually located in your community, you can find one. A lot of people choose to do those for the first, or at least at the beginning, because you get practice setting up your tent, you get practice setting up your booth display, you get practice working with your point of sale, you get practice pricing, you get feedback from customers on what they're liking and not liking. So there are some benefits to it. Just consider everything when you're deciding what to do. There's craft fairs, which have been around for a while, and the pros are they are usually focused on handmade things. So if you're a handmade person, or you make handmade things, then that is a bonus. Better organized than most farmers markets. Some are juried, many are not. Sometimes they have a lower booth fee as well, and they're often a fundraiser for a nonprofit, a church, or a school. So they're held indoors, in like a gym or a cafeteria or something like that. So they're usually protected from weather, which is nice if you're doing something with paper or things like that. Cons they're often outdated crafts. Often older shoppers. As I mentioned before, they're often held in churches or schools, and that makes load in and load out challenging. You usually have to, park in the parking lot and carry your stuff in, as opposed to driving up and unloading right into your booth space and then parking. So all those are things to consider about craft fairs. Again, they're very common, especially in the fall time holiday craft fairs and things like that. So they're easy to find. A lot have been happening for many, 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 many years in a row. So they have a following. So handmade, makers, artisan, and vintage markets are our next category. And the pros are they're usually better organized. They're usually put on by a small business or maybe a vendor themselves, which means they're going to be better marketed because they have skin in the game. It's their job. Usually you can find younger shoppers. Sometimes they're even geared towards the younger type of shopper, college students, or just like the young adult type of age range. A lot are at breweries or places like that are local places that people frequent, especially younger people. You're usually surrounded by higher quality vendors. Some are juried and some aren't. It just depends. Cons are there is definitely a wide range of definitions of these types of markets and types of vendors that are allowed. Some jury, some you just buy a pass, so you have no clue if there could be, if you're a jewelry person especially, or clothing or soap or things like that where there's a lot. You could be with 10 other people doing the same thing you're doing. So there's that. The price is usually more for your booth fee than the other ones I've mentioned so far, and some require shoppers to pay a admission fee and some don't. So that just kind of depends on who your people are, your customers are. Next is festivals. Pros are there's usually lots and lots of traffic. Usually the entire community is aware of the event, sometimes even a regional or national awareness, depending on like in our area, Covered Bridge is definitely a regional festival, and people know about it all over. So that brings lots of people in. Cons, they're usually free to get into shop. Vendors may not be the primary attraction. It just depends on, what they're doing and why they're doing it. Many attendees may not be our ideal customers. They may just be there to, have fun with their family and eat some good food, and they're not really there to buy handmade things or anything at all. It just kind of depends on who the people are. But because there's so many of them, it could be that a percentage of them are your people and they will buy your stuff, and it will be a very good event for you. Trade shows, pros, a lot of traffic. It's usually very, very well marketed. Cons, booth fees are very, very high. Most vendors there are service related, so people that are coming to shop are not looking necessarily for retail or handmade things. They're looking more for landscaping or siding or house painting or renovation, contractors and things like that. Sometimes the entrance fee is for shoppers or attendees is pretty high for people who just want to shop and look around for Christmas gifts, so there's that. And then the last type is art fair. The pros are in art fairs, buyers are expecting to spend some money. That's why they're there, and they kind of know that it's going to cost a lot. There is a very strict jurying process to ensure high quality vendors, and everything is handmade by them. They're real big on no buy, sell, no, one artist per booth, all of that. So, and usually the events are free or low cost to get into as a shopper. So that's, could be a pro. Cons for the vendor, usually it's a higher booth fee. It can be very tough to get into some of these events because of the jurying process. Attendance can be lower. And there's not as many of them as craft fairs or farmers markets or, you know, the others that we've talked about so far. So there are, and like I mentioned originally, there are some overlap in all of them. People use different words. The organizer gets to decide, and then you get to decide if it's the right place for you to be. We've participated personally in all these types of events except art fairs. Although we'll do some later this year, and we'll add in more for next year, and we'll share the details about our experience with that as soon as we've had several of them under our belt. We've primarily, up until now, chosen to be at handmade, artisan type events and festivals. Some have been really great, some have been not so great. So keep trying, keep going to new places to see how they work out for you. And there's just a lot of variables. So, you know, event location, your booth location, the weather, other types of vendors there, how well they're organized, you know, how well they did the advertising, the type of shopper that's your shopper versus what they've got at their event, what you're selling, your booth setup, etc. There's just a whole bunch of variables. So keep trying different kinds of events to see what works best for you, and it could be a hybrid of them as well. We figured out from doing all of this that there is one particular city that's nearby us that has consistently had lower sales, like the lowest sales of all of the events we did last year. Last year we did 63 markets all over, and every one we did in this particular city was low. And so it didn't even really matter who the organizer was, what type of event it was. Some were festivals, some were more of the handmade artisan market type thing. So it's interesting once you keep a spreadsheet and you can kind of see what all this is telling you. And interestingly about that particular city, in our discussions with some other vendors, we've found that they've discovered the same thing. So, you know, there could also be certain places that don't work for you, like location-wise of the event. So I've been talking, usually I try to keep these at 5 to 7 minutes. We're at 12 minutes now. But in summary, consider your product, who you think your potential buyer is, and what your goals are, and start there to pick out what kind of events you should be going for. Keep a spreadsheet, like I just said, so you can see where the trends are, and then apply your critical thinking skills to determine what's worth trying again, what absolutely wasn't worth it for whatever reason, and what may be worth the risk of paying more for your booth space, of driving farther outside your range that you've determined is good, or improving your booth experience or social media presence to get accepted maybe into something like an art fair where they have very strict standards. In the end, just remember, it's all opportunity, and no matter what happens, you get data that will help you determine what to do next. And if you lead with friendliness toward your customers, your fellow vendors, the organizer, and you show interest in them when you're interacting with them, you'll definitely end up with some new friends. You'll end up with some new leads on events, and that is really invaluable, because it's really impossible to just read about an event sometimes and know exactly what to expect without hearing it from somebody who's been there and done that. So thank you for listening. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, and if you want to get notification of more things like this, you're welcome to visit our website, and we'll talk soon.